Truth in This Art. I am your host, Rob Lee. And today, I'm in conversation with the Curator and Department Head for Contemporary Art at the Baltimore Museum of Art. Her recent exhibition projects include How Do We Know the World? Thaddeus Mosley, Forest, Stephanie Saijuko, Vanishing Point, Overlay, and most recently, A Movement in Every Direction, Legacies of the Great Migration, which was co-organized with the Mississippi Museum of Art. Please welcome Jessica Bell Brown. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Rob.
Thank you for coming on. I mean, we got the glasses going. I like it. It's simpatico. I love it. So again, thank you for being on this podcast and taking the time. And before we get, too deep and embedded into the real conversation, I want to open it up with, something that either people find to be very challenging, talking about themselves, or very I love talking about myself. I'll tell you everything. So if you could open it up a little bit and tell us about your story as it comes to art, curation, art history. Could you share a little bit with us?
Sure. I'm from Macon, Georgia. That's where I grew up. And I have always lived with an appreciation for art. I think my parents had, I think they sort of valued representation and growing up with images that looked like us. So there were always some sort of print or drawing or usually kind of in the realm of Black romantic art, but nonetheless, I think it really set the stage for an appreciation of the power of visual representation. There's always been an affinity for and reverence for images. I think not even just art, but just images. Family photos were always kind of on full display in my parents' homes, in my grandparents' homes. It was just, a part of everyday life. Every holiday, we would go through photo albums and look not only back at my childhood with my two sisters growing up, but my parents, their school photos, their family photos, my grandparents. So I think in that sense, I've always kind of been attracted to finding beauty in the world and finding beauty in our kind of stories. So when I got to college, I stumbled my way into an art history class and never really left.
Thank you. Thank you for walking us through that. And I think it's always interesting to kind of learn some of those early experiences. Usually it's what is your first experience with art? And I think that kind of pops back up, things that you were exposed to kind of pops back up and maybe what you pursue or maybe what you even like. So I like to really peel that onion back sometimes to get a sense of so why do you like this? Well, I did a painting of it looks like the Low End Theory from A Tribe Called Quest, and it's in the studio. And I was like, why do I like this? I was like, oh, right. Those are the colors, right. Because I saw this when I was a kid and my parents always had this type of stuff in the house.
Black nationalist, Pan-Africanist kind of color. Yeah. Yes. All the things.
So let's, so pursuing that career in art. So let's talk about that a little bit and talk about curation. I know very little. I hear a lot of people call themselves curators, but you're actually a curator. So if you will, what does being a curator entail? What does your day-to-day sort of look like? And I would imagine it varies, but what does your day-to-day sort of look like?
Yeah, I think in the most sort of basic sense, a curator is a caretaker of objects. Traditionally in a museum context, although that has of course expanded. I think I take the word care, not lightly, take it very seriously. And so that extends to, as a contemporary curator, I'm not only caring for objects that enter the collection, I'm caring for the artists who made them and the communities that I think are also kind of represented by and within, those objects being in the orbit of the museum in terms of our galleries, our exhibitions, and the various sort of programs and sort of outward facing communication and connection that happens as a result of that art making. The second part of your question, remind me, Rob.
Oh yeah, sorry. So the day-to-day piece. So
They look like every day. Oh, if only you had asked me that question a week ago. It varies. It varies quite a bit.
Sure.
Let's see. At any given point in time, I might be in a different stage or phase of a project. At the BMA, there are a few sort of buckets that drive our work as curators, because we're a demi-encyclopedic institution, or in general, a collecting institution. So we acquire artworks made by folks in the world, past and present. It means that we are actively, every sort of season, engaging in a process of research and exploration, refinement, and sort of looking at things, going to galleries, going to other museum shows, going to artist studios, and finding objects of great significance that we feel could speak to our audiences and unpack new histories. So there's that aspect of the process, which is very exciting. And then there's the administrative part of that process, which is really all logistics and documentation and emailing back and forth and coordinating shipping and getting letters out, blah, blah, blah. So that's one part of it. There's also, as a curator, we are charged with making exhibitions. Sometimes those exhibitions are monographic and sometimes they're thematic. What I mean by monographic, usually we kind of focus on one subject or one person, one artist. If it's a thematic exhibition, it means that you're bringing many voices, or at least more than one sort of voice into the mix or into the fold. And that process is not unlike the accessions process, where you're going through a period of fact finding. You're talking to different artists. You're going to the library. You're going to the archives. Probably you are going to different collectors' homes, looking at works by those artists that you're interested in that they have. You're hopping in and out of studios. But then there reaches a point where you have your idea. You put pen to paper, you make a proposal, and it goes through an internal process where you get all the stakeholders who have a vested interest in the outcome. A vested interest in the outcome of your project. You learn together as a collectivity of museum workers how to bring this project into the world. And so I feel like a lot of curating is mostly project management. It's mostly the day-to-day details, the administration, the hand-holding, and all of that. And then there's a small fraction of it is actually the glamorous ideation, traveling kind of stage. But it's so worth it when you look up in 2 years down the line and you're looking up at a project like A Movement in Every Direction, Legacies of the Great Migration, and you see not only the tremendous efforts of the brilliant artists that you brought into the fold, but also the efforts of all of your colleagues and all of the communities that uphold those efforts and coalesce them into something tangible for audiences to see.
Well, thank you. And I think that's a good point for us to not bury the lead any further. So could you tell us about the exhibition? Can you tell us about A Movement in Every Direction, Legacies of the Great Migration? Can you share some of the thoughts that went into that, you and Ryan's vision or inspiration for this exhibit?
Of course. See what I did there, Rob?
It's like you've done an interview before.
Yeah. So you referred to Ryan, my wonderful, wonderful co-curator and partner in imagination, Ryan Dennis, who is the chief curator and artistic director of the Center for Art and Public Exchange at the Mississippi Museum of Art. Ryan and I co-curated this wonderful show about the continuum of impact of the Great Migration, which is, for those of you who might not be as familiar, it is a period of about 6 decades from 1915 to 1970, where 6 million African Americans left the South and fled for the Northeast, the Midwest, the West Coast, the Southwest, and even within the Southeastern region. Hence why we called our show A Movement in Every Direction. So Ryan and I both started at our institutions, me, the BMA, and her, the MMA, within about 4 to 6 months of each other, and knew right away that we both were kind of conjured to imagine how we might approach this subject of migration from a contemporary lens, and how we might do so in a way that acknowledges the ways in which Baltimore and Jackson, Mississippi, are entangled in the same historical arc, but just at different kind of, with different nuances, right? Baltimore being, or excuse me, Jackson being one of the earliest places of departure for migrants, and Baltimore being one of the earliest places of arrival for new migrants. So our cities, our museums are situated in cities that have been fundamentally transformed by this migration. So that's the kind of setting of the stage. And then through the process of about maybe 4 to 6 months, Ryan and I started to talk about, okay, well, how do we inhabit this prompt to do a show about the legacy of the Great Migration? What's important to us? And what kinds of artists did we want in the mix? We knew that we wanted the exhibition to be intergenerational. We felt like having a variety of voices in the mix who would only sort of benefit the project, in that it would allow a kind of heteroglossia to unfold, kind of polyphonic, rhizomatic, multi-textured exhibition. That's what we were after. We wanted folks who have different ways of working. This exhibition is all about storytelling and history, but it's also contemporary. So that meant that the exhibition, we didn't need to sort of rehash what had been done prior with exhibitions around this subject matter. And we wanted artists who were thinking about questions around agency, self-determination, land, community, collectivity. In that sense, our project, the kind of parameters for our project really became quite clear. Like those, and maybe not limitations, but rather like, wow, like how amazing would it be to bring these minds into this space and to say, go crazy, go wild, like do what you've always wanted to do, but maybe not maybe that thing is something that you might not have had the resources to do, or the time, or maybe even the kind of curatorial support and encouragement and acknowledgement. So, and that process, even though, 4 to 6 months sounds like a long time, but it's actually not when you think about, all of this was happening with the backdrop of COVID. There was a backdrop of grief, of uncertainty. There was the Great Resignation happening at the same time too. There were a lot of things that this country was facing that also kind of felt maybe not like a mirror to this period of the sort of early 20th century, where folks were really kind of facing another global pandemic. In that case, the Spanish flu, the continued rise of Jim Crow, I mean, there were these sort of echoes between the period, like between the contemporary moment and the past. But in short, I think we were trying to move it as curators, and as two Black women from the South, whose families decided to remain rooted in the South. You know, we were interested in saying more, and moving moving in a way that allowed us to acknowledge the complexities of these histories, and to be respectful of the artists who I think exercised great trust and courageousness and bravery by sharing things that are quite personal in their family stories.
So as you're talking about family, I think I'd be remiss not to ask this question. So family lineage seems to be a unifying theme here, obviously. Do you have any family connections to the Great Migration?
I do, in that, you know, it's so funny. So I went to Northwestern for college, and it wasn't until maybe the time that I became like a junior or senior that I learned that I had cousins in the 1930s who had who were based in Ohio, who had actually gone to Northwestern too. And in that sense, when my dad told me that, I'm like, that doesn't make sense. All of our family is in Georgia.
Right.
And it is, you know, and that is relatively true in that both my mom's side of the family, my dad's side of the family, about 90% of my family is based in the South and has deep ties to Georgia. But there are a few family members that made their way northward, or family members that got dispersed into the world vis-a-vis their military service, and then made their way back to the South. My dad being, you know, like his stepfather and my grandmother moved the family to North Carolina and then to Montana, like these kind of places that you just wouldn't think that there was a kind of, or North Carolina, yes, but Montana, like
not as much.
No, yeah. But so as the project unfolded, and as I think we were experiencing this moment of like deep reflection and quietude collectively, as you know, it allowed for me to really think about the ways in which my own story intersects with this larger history that Ryan and I were kind of narrating in the creation of the publications for the book, for the exhibition, and also in sort of interweaving through lines within and across the 12 artists in the show, whose names I just want to give a quick shout out now, because without their brilliance, none of this would be possible. Akia Bouillon, Mark Bradford, Zoe Charlton, Larry Cook, Torquasi Dyson, Theaster Gates Jr., Allison Janae Hamilton, Leslie Hewitt, Stephanie Jemison, Robert Pruitt, Jamia Richmond Edwards, and Carrie Mae Weems.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Were there any surprises when you saw some of the work? Because 12 artists, different perspective, different skills, different approaches, and all of that goes into it. And this sounds like, and I would imagine all of the work that goes into this is huge. So what sort of surprises, if any, did you encounter when you saw the work in person?
Mm-hmm. I think one of the biggest surprises that Ryan and I had was probably, I would say maybe Larry Cook's work. There was a moment, we love Larry, shout out to Larry. Incredible conceptual photographer, Howard University professor in the sort of fine arts department, and comes from a background of thinking about vernacular photography, carceral aesthetics, DC go-go kind of club culture and photography practices. But for his proposal for our show, A Movement in Every Direction, he was interested in going to all the places where the Cook men and the family had traveled down south. He had ties to Georgia and South Carolina across 4 generations, if not more. And there was a moment in the project where he kind of just got really quiet, and we were like reaching out to him like, Larry, what's going on? What are we doing? And he was going through a kind of transformation of his project. And it turned out in the best of ways, because he started to look more inward, even in terms of like what he had decided to photograph. So he traveled down to Georgia and South Carolina, was learning more about his father's side of the family, interviewing family members, doing oral histories, and then would stop along the side of the road at various places, cotton fields, forests, bodies of water, and take these large format landscape photographs. But really, these landscape photographs kind of come together to be this portrait of the arc of his family history. There was a history of estrangement between fathers and sons in his family that through this project he was able to unpack and ultimately come to a place of healing. And so his project, Let My Testimony Sit Next to Yours, is all about taking these elements that might seem distant or historical or even somewhat removed from signification, and creating a new map of knowledge for breaking cycles in his family history. And when you see it, I won't give it all away, but when you go see the exhibition at the Baltimore Museum of Art, and you have until January 29th to do so.
Like these plugs.
I think you will be taken aback and blown away by the power of stepping into one's sort of family history and telling your story, which is what I think Larry and all of the other artists have done so beautifully.
Thank you. So I got two more real questions. And one, I want to ask, I'm going to ask, if you had to choose three adjectives to describe a movement in every direction, Legacies of the Great Migration, which would you choose? What are the three adjectives you choose?
I would say the first adjective would be resplendent. I just think it is a show that demonstrates the ways in which Black folks in this country have had to always kind of reach for the light, even in the darkest of times and circumstances. And so that resiliency, that sense of being kind of held and carried, and like that sense of like bounty, I think is connected to the use of the word resplendent there, because there's just so much to unpack and so much to sit with, but also to celebrate. Two other words, I would say it's resounding in that this show is stunning, but it's also just like the density of sound, and it carries through the whole exhibition. I mean, there's elements of folk songs and gospel and jazz improvisation and contemporary sort of melodic, Black melodic forms. It's just, it's a sensorium in so many ways. And that sound really does carry through and carry you through the exhibition.
Yeah. Do you have another word that begins with an R? Because you got two so
nope,
far.
I
was
don't.
waiting. And also,
nope, I don't. We're not doing that today, Rob.
Also, I'll say the way you described that last adjective made me think of immersive. That's what I was kind of hearing there. It's like you have this sort of soundscape, and it really sets that stage with the visuals, with the sound, and just potentially hitting multiple senses. I don't know if you have a taste element there, but multiple senses.
Actually, in fact, we do. The Astor Gates's installation, the Double Wide, is a celebration of the sights, sounds, smells, and tastes of the South, and there are dozens of pickled vegetables and hog maws and pig ears and jams and jellies that you'll encounter when you see the exhibition, and his installation in particular, which is magnetic. Yeah. But I feel like the last adjective that I would use would be maybe tender. And I say that because there will be, as you walk through the show, my hope is that you'll see things that feel familiar to you, whether it be the kind of sepia toned lusciousness of family photos, textiles that, the sort of sense of the hands, things that are like handcrafted, that you might find in the elders in your families, the kind of sense of heirloom objects, some of which are actually, have been passed on to the artist. I'm thinking in the case of Leslie Hewitt in particular, her grandmother's glass vessels, crystal vessels, which are the only things that one of very few things that she has remaining of, from her grandmother, memory of her grandmother. Those are actually installed, on the floor of the exhibition. So you'll see those. So I want people to kind of walk away with a sense of deep tenderness and like a feeling of like kinship as they move through the exhibition.
I like how you answered that last part, because you actually knocked out my last question, my last real question. So, and as we wrap up these final moments here, I got to ask you some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
Can't get away from those, and then we'll do some shameless plugs regarding the show and all of that great stuff, because people need to pull up. So, these are ridiculous. They're funny, but they're ridiculous. So, there's 25 hours now in a day. How do you spend the extra hour?
Oh, rest. Full stop. I'm on my pillow because I do not sleep. It's a problem. It's a big problem.
As it relates to what, because I think we're all a mix, what you value more, is it book smarts or street smarts?
Book smarts, because I feel like street smarts, you can learn how to be street smart, because you will make mistakes and learn from them. But yeah, so I value book smarts.
Okay, you're the first that said it. I've asked this question a lot. You're the first that said it. Okay, finally, we now have book smarts on the board. Let's do it. This is the last one for you, and because obviously well read. I mean, I'm looking at words over here. I'm like, resplendent. What's that? So, what is a quote that resonates with you, just something that's top of mind that resonates with you? Maybe you apply it to how you curate, maybe you apply it to like how you go through life as a person here in the city. What's a quote that resonates with you?
I think right now, all things in time. I think we move so quickly and through life, and sometimes we just need to take a step back and be patient and be in the moment. So that's where I'm at right now.
Thank you. That's great. It wasn't that hard. You got it. It's right there. So with that, I want to thank you for coming on to this podcast and sharing a bit with me about your work, the exhibition, and for the listeners, if you will, can you? I want to invite and encourage you to tell the listeners the details on the exhibition, where to check out information, where to get tickets, all of that good stuff. The floor is yours.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rob. It's been a pleasure. I hope this won't be the last time that I get to come on to your podcast, because it's been a delight. You can see A Movement in Every Direction, Legacies of the Great Migration at the Baltimore Museum of Art. It opened to the public October 30th. It will be up on view until January 29th. There will be incredible programs happening throughout the run of the exhibition. I encourage you to go to artbma.org to get all of the details and to reserve tickets to see our show. You can also publish you can publish both, but two catalogs dedicated to the exhibition. Volume 1 is A Movement in Every Direction, a Great Migration Critical Reader, which brings together all of the historical and archival research that Ryan and I put together in the sort of making and grounding of this exhibition. And Volume 2, A Movement in Every Direction, Legacies of the Great Migration, is our exhibition catalog. Both books are published by Yale University Press and are available at the BMA store, online, and at retailers worldwide.
Thank you. And there you have it, folks. I want to again thank Jessica Bell Brown from the Baltimore Museum of Art, the BMA, for coming on and chopping it up with me and sharing some of the work that went into A Movement in Every Direction, Legacies of the Great Migration. And for Jessica Bell Brown, I'm Rob Lee saying that there's art, culture in and around your neck of the woods. You just got to look for it.